Scooby-Doo's Fat Case. Part 1. As usual, when the gang was making a trap for the monster, Shaggy and Scooby found themselves being the monster bait. But this time Shaggy had found an advantage in doing this. As they were walking through the campsite, Shaggy said to Scooby, "Hey Scoob, you know where would be great place to start searching for monsters?" "I don't know, Raggy, where?" Scooby asked, confused over Shaggy apparently wanting to find the villain. "The camping pantry," Shaggy said, lighting up both his and Scooby's face as they both made their way towards the campsite's pantry. The gang had asked them to find the monster so they could trick it into the trap they were making down at the bridge, but they didn't say where to look. As Scooby and Shaggy made their way towards the shed where the camping staff keeps their food stored, they both kept their eyes open for anything to pop up around the corners. Knowing their bad luck, they were prepared to have the monster show up just when they were about to enter the shed and have them cased away from the food. So you could guess their surprise when they got up to the shed. Shaggy turned the door, and inside was nothing else but food. Quickly getting inside, Shaggy closed and locked the door, and Scooby covered the windows. Now they were going to be able to enjoy a real feast without getting interrupted by any monsters, and enjoying it they did. There were a lot of things to choose from. There was hot dogs, hamburger, corn dogs, marshmallows, candy and much more. And as usual, when Shaggy and Scooby has one of their great feasts, they always start an eating competition between them. They each stack up their own food mountain for preparing, and on the count of 3 they dived into it. Shaggy got a good head start over Scooby because Scooby's collar prevented him from stretching out his throat for too big of portions of food to be swallowed. Feeling the food almost get stuck in his throat, Scooby had to throw up the food into his mouth again and take swallowing it in smaller portions. While doing this, Shaggy had managed to eat 2 pizzas, 3 burger, and 14 marshmallows, while Scooby had so far only managed to eat 1 pizza, 2 burgers, and 4 corn dogs. Still determined to win, Scooby had found a good paces of stuffing, chewing, and swallowing to try and catch up to Shaggy's lead. As they both were going on, their bellies started to fill up with all the junk food they were taking in. Shaggy's were stretched out 5 inches so far, and Scooby's was only 3. That's when the tables started to turn. As Shaggy was getting into his 4th pizza and 5th burger, he started to feel a slightly pain in his stomach area. Seeing Scooby still keeping a steady and quick pace made Shaggy ignore the pain and tried to stuff even more inside him, but it became more and more difficult to do as the pains continued to grow within him. It finally reached a point where it would really hurt him if he stuffed something more inside him. His stomach was only stretched out 8 inches, and he knew from experience that he could take much more. Looking down at it, he could see what the problem was. He still had his pants clasped with his belt attached to it. No wonder his belly had a hard time expanding with this stopping it. "Oh, how could I do such a rookie mistake?" Shaggy thought to himself as he undid his pants to let his belly get more free space, but it was too late for that now. The pain his stomach had to take wouldn't stop, and he had to accept himself as defeated. "Sometimes it's rude not wearing our laws," Scooby said, patting his swollen stomach. Even thought Scooby had won, he still wanted to see where his limits were and continued eating. "You know, you don't have to continue eating, Scoob," Shaggy said, stroking his hurting stomach. "I know I lost. If my belt hadn't been sitting so tight around me, I could have lasted longer. So rid my roller, but that didn't stop me," Scooby said, cocky in between mouthfuls. After eating 10 pizzas, 14 burgers, 12 corn dogs, 8 packages of marshmallows, and 2 barrels of mixed candy, Scooby felt himself getting full, stopped only by the limited stretchiness of his own body. His stomach now dragged on with a weight of around 90 pounds. It hangs down 16 inches, and was about 8 inches wide. Opening the door and walking out from the shed, Shaggy had to keep one of his hands under his belly to help with his balance when he walked, while the big sack under Scooby was so heavy that for every step he took it made it swing so powerfully that it almost made Scooby tip over by the force. "Well, Scoob, looks like we have to try and find that mad killer that goes around in here," Shaggy said, looking back at Scooby, and right on cue the door to the shed was closed violently, making Shaggy and Scooby look behind themselves, and then they saw the thing they were looking for, a 6-foot-tall creep with a football helmet hiding his face, and wielding a chainsaw. Going almost on autopilot, both Shaggy and Scooby's legs started to take off, with the rest of them following after. The killer started to chase them, and Shaggy and Scooby tried to get to Fred and the girls with the trap. To get to the bridge where they were, Shaggy and Scooby had to run through the forest, and with the condition they had now, that wasn't the easiest. As they tried to get through the dense terrain, Shaggy had to crouch under a big thick branch and move away another smaller branch to get though, but doing so led to, when releasing that small branch from his hand, Shaggy sent unintentionally the branch right into Scooby's face. The impact was so quick and hard that it sent Scooby falling into a bush by the side and lost his consciousness. Looking back after Scooby, all Shaggy saw was Killer getting closer to him. Realizing that Scooby possibly was safer than him, right, made Shaggy ignore him and focus on surviving on his own. Reaching towards the bridge, Fred, Daphne, and Velma were hiding underneath it, prepared to catch the monster. As they heard the sound of Shaggy's regular screams of help followed by the grunting sound from the monster, Fred shouted, "Shaggy, get him to chase you over the bridge." To Shaggy doing what Fred said, Shaggy started running over the bridge with the killer after him. Halfway across the bridge, Fred pressed a button releasing a trapdoor that the killer fell through. During the fall he lost his grip on the chainsaw, leaving it on the bridge. Underneath the bridge the gang had prepared a fishing net for the killer to fall into. As he did, Fred pulled a rope that took and pulled the net together, trapping the killer. Later, when police was called to the place, everybody stood ready to unmask the villain. The Sapphire Lake Killer is no other than, Velma said, taking off the football helmet, "Freddie Voorhees. Freddie Voorhees." The other three of the gang said simultaneously, "Yes, Freddie Voorhees." Velma said, "He wanted to own the ground the campsite was on, because he knew about the plans to build a top modern spa and resort hotel right here. The ground would be worth millions to anyone owning it, so he used the legend about fictional killer of Camp Sapphire Lake to scare away all campers till he could buy the ground cheap. And I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids," Freddie Voorhees said. Waiting for a certain dog to ask for his part of it, the gang stood silent for a moment before realizing that Scooby wasn't with them. As Freddie Voorhees was being driven to jail, the gang asked Shaggy where Scooby was. Remembering the chase, Shaggy told them that he had probably been lost in the woods somewhere. The gang wanted to throw a search party after Scooby, but Velma said that walking into these woods in pitch black darkness would just get them lost as well. "We know Scooby. I think he knows how to survive out there for at least one night. Okay gang, we get ourselves a good night's sleep, and then first thing in the morning we do is finding Scooby," Fred said. The next morning all four of them were up early when the sun started rising, immediately searching the woods after Scooby-Doo. Their first plan was to try and get Shaggy to remember how the chase from the shed to the bridge had looked like. Walking the path down, they all shouted Scooby's name, hoping he would hear them, and he did. Having had a good night's sleep, Scooby's ears were quick to pick up the sound of his friends shouting his name. Hearing that they were very close to him, Scooby took and shouted back to get their attention. Hearing the sound of Scooby's voice drove the gang closer to his hiding place. Sticking his head outside the bush, Scooby could see the gang heading towards him. He could see them, and they could see him. Seeing them, Scooby took and walked out of the bush, but doing so left the gang stopping, looking shocked over Scooby's appearance. Looking down at himself, Scooby saw why. The thing with how Shaggy and Scooby's bodies works is that when they eat a lot and then does a big chase running away from a monster, they burn all those extra calories they got from eating. But when Scooby eats so much that he did, and only got started in the chase before getting knocked unconscious, that led to his body starting to burn the calories without him doing anything to lose them, and when they didn't have anywhere to go during the whole night, well, Scooby's belly previously was very big and heavy and hard to touch because it was stuffed to its limits. Now it had shrunken down to hang down 8 inches and weight only 50 pounds. Feeling it with his paw, Scooby's worst concerns were confirmed. it felt all soft, and was now storing a large amount of fat. Looking up at the gang still staring at his new body, Scooby's cheeks flushed slightly, and he said, "Hey heh, oops." Part 2. As the mystery machine was driving along the road, it hit a speed bump. The sudden impact caused Scooby to jump a little, creating a bit of a jiggle from his new fatty stomach. For being someone who had always been eating a lot without care in the past, Scooby had never had any problems with his weight. Until now, he had already had this new body for a few days, and it still felt so weird and unreal for Scooby to have a permanent gut hanging out from him. Being that he didn't have the same body as a human, having a hanging gut made ordinary things much more difficult for Scooby. Walking on all four was not good for his back, since it dragged his whole midsection down by its weight, and when he tried to lie down and rest, he would find his back being pushed up by his stomach that was in the way. If he tried to lie on his back, instead the big belly would make him spread out his hind legs to give it room to expand. He liked the feeling of eating a lot and letting his stomach be stretched out, but to have this extra weight hanging down from him permanently wasn't as appealing to him. The gang themselves were also worried about it, and had therefore decided to take Scooby to a vet. Luckily for them, Velma happens to have a distant relative that was working as a vet, and just not any vet, a vet who was also working in science about everything that was about animals and medicine. He was a part of a huge collaboration with other scientists working together at an enormous skyscraper that was working as both a vet clinic and a science facility, and that's where the gang was headed. As the gang was driving towards their goal, the weather had been pretty nice and sunny, but that all changed dramatically when they were getting closer to the building. In the distance they could see the building appear. It was 13 stories high and was in grey and dark brown colors. It had a huge logo hanging up across the 8 floors that looked like a dog's collar with a tag where the initials VD was craved. That stood for vets and doctors. As they got closer, the weather went from clear and sunny to cloudy and rainy. As soon as they parked the van next to the place, a struck of lightning hit the roof of the place. "Oh boy, can we never have any luck with the weather?" Shaggy asked, disappointed. As they got out of the van, Scooby jumped out to land on his feet, only to have the weight from his belly drag him down to the ground. Getting really irritating on his extra weight, Scooby hoped that this visit to the vet would make it disappear. You know, Scooby was serious about this now, considering he, like other dogs, hated to go to the vet. Entering the building, the first thing the gang saw was the place's reception desk. The room had 3 exits, one to the left, one to the right, and the one from where they entered, and in the other end of the room was the reception desk. Sitting there was one woman. She was an African American woman with a dark brown skin, who was also very big. She stood 7 feet tall and weighed around 400 pounds. She had triple chins, a big round belly, and some thick tights. Still, her weight didn't seem to affect her in any way, as she managed to do things like sit down, walk around, and bend over and pick things up without any problems. She also had glasses, had long black hair that was lying straight down, and was dressed in an oversized green dress with little patterns of darker and lighter green. As the gang approached the desk, they saw the woman being very concentrated in her works. Standing next to the edge of the table, the woman still hadn't noticed any of them standing there. Fred coughed a bit, trying to get her attention, but the woman still didn't seem to notice. Getting another idea, Fred decided to stretch his arm out to press one of the keys on her keyboard. Looking the other way around while whistling innocently, Fred stretched his arm towards one of the keys. While reaching his finger towards it, he suddenly felt a tight grip around his wrist. Looking at it, he saw the lady behind the counter was holding his wrist. "What do you want?" she asked while releasing her grip on Fred's wrist. "We are here because we would want to meet a certain Dr. Dinkleberg," Fred said while feeling his wrist was still okay. "He can't take anybody. Guy's so busy with his own medical experiment that you will have to wait at least a month for a chance to talk to him," the lady said without losing her eye contact with the screens. "I think he said that if his niece with friend would come, they were going to be able to meet him directly," Velma said. For the first time since meeting them, the lady looked away from the screens to look at Velma instead. Adjusting her glasses a little, the lady then said, "Yeah, I think I can see some family resembles on you and the doctor." You were the ones who were having a dog with a bit of a weight problem? The lady asked, and looked down at Scooby. I've seen some fat dogs in my time, but that's probably one of the worst cases I've seen, she said pretty casually, before turning back to her screens again. Look who's ralking. Scooby muttered to himself. If you take the entrance to the right you will find the doctor's assistants waiting to escort you now, the lady said before going back to do her usual workings again. Wait, Velma said confused. When did he get an assistant? He never told me that he had one. He just got one a couple of days ago, the lady said while doing her works, and if you would be so kind to stop speaking to me now, I'm behind my works enough already. Respecting her wish, the gang decided to leave her alone. As the gang walked towards the entrance, they were greeted by a young guy who looked like he had barely been graduated from high school. He was about 6 feet tall, normally built, had notched short orange hair, and was dressed in a red and white t-shirt, some half-worn jeans, a couple of sneakers, and a typical lab coat that he was required to wear in this environment. Hey there, the guy said as he saw the gang coming towards him. You must be gang that Mr. Dinkleyberg said would come. Fred was the first one to walk up to and shake hands with him. That's right, I'm Fred, and this is Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and our dog Scooby-Doo. Velma, oh, so you are the one who is the niece to the doctor, the guy said as he approached Velma. Yes, but who are you? Velma asked, still confused over this sudden assistance her relative doctor now had. The name's Jeremy Miller, and I'm an intern assistant to Dr. Dinkleyberg. I have a huge interest in working with inventing new and improving medicines, and luckily for me I happened to meet the doctor just a couple of days ago. He saw the great potential in me and decided to take me as his assistant to help analyzing his works while finishing up my high school exams. Jeremy explained. I think he would have told me about getting himself an assistant on a phone call or an email before I got here, Velma said suspiciously. He has just been so busy these last few days that he just probably didn't have time to think about doing it, Jeremy explained, as he then asked the gang to follow him, so he could lead them to where Dr. Dinkleyberg's lab was located. The doctor has been working on something so great that almost nobody knows about it, Jeremy explained as he led the gang through the hallways of the building. Except for me and him, nobody knows about it, not even Clara. Carla? Fred asked curiously. I think you all meet her before, Jeremy answered. She's the lady who works in the reception. Even though she spends almost all day there, she always seems to know everything that is going on here, and even sometimes people have said that she just disappears. Zoinks, he disappears, Shaggy said scared. Yes, Jeremy answered. Sometimes you can see her sitting there in her chair doing her works, then you turn your back away for just 1 second, and she's suddenly gone. The half-spooky tale was enough for Scooby to jump into Shaggy's arms for protection like Har always did, but given his added weight to it when he jumped into Shaggy's arms, he accidentally made Shaggy lose his balance and sent them both falling to the ground. Looking up, he saw the other 3 of the gang and Jeremy staring at his embarrassing fall. I really need to lose this weight soon, Scooby thought as his cheeks got red of embarrassment. As the gang arrived to Dr. Dinkleyberg's office, they were greeted by the doctor himself outside. He was standing at 5 feet 7 inches, had the same kind of brownish hair as Velma, except in a lighter shade, and had the typical body type of a man in his 60s. He greeted them all happily, and gave his niece a great hug. So nice to see you again, Velma, he said. I'm glad to see you again too, Uncle, Velma said back. Jeremy, the doctor shouted, could you go to my office and get those things I asked you to get for when the gang would arrive? Of course, Dr. Dinkleyberg, the young assistant said, and walked into the doctor's office. Without him present, Velma asked her uncle, but why didn't you tell me that you had gotten yourself an assistant? Well, I guess Jeremy already told you, but I have been so incredibly busy working with a certain great project, that I simply needed someone else to help me with my other things. I think Jeremy told us almost the same things, Fred said. Yeah, and what is this great experiment both you and Jeremy talked about? Velma asked. Oh, that's something very special that I'm planning on revealing to everyone here later today. The doctor explained. Nobody except for me and Jeremy knows about this great discovery that will become a huge milestone in medicine. Right at that moment Jeremy returned with 5 passports for the gang. They each had the logo of the company, some details about where the passports allowed access to, and also a photo of every one of them. These are all older photos of you, so I hope that you haven't changed too much since being taken. Jeremy said as he handed out the passports to everyone. When he got to Scooby he looked at passport and then back at Scooby before putting it on him. I hope the guards still will recognize you despite the changes. Jeremy said jokingly as he put Scooby's pass on him. Looking at the picture of him Scooby frowned a bit thinking, right face hasn't ranged, has it? Before feeling his chin and cheeks to be sure, while putting them on Velma asked the doctor and Jeremy, how did you choose Jeremy to be your assistant? I know about who would be willing to work with easy jobs, with a small salary, and would be just as happy for the experience of working here as for the money. Dr. Dinkleyberg explained, and that leads me to the answer of a student with a huge interest in working in the medical veterinary area. And being just a high school student I found it possible to balance my schedule for both studying and working. Jeremy added, but mostly I chose Jeremy because he reminded me so much of myself when I was young. I found out that he even went to the same summer camp as I did in my youth. Summingham's Techno Camp. It was a great place where they taught everyone how to make their own little remote controlled cars, or small helicopters, or... I think you are disappearing into memories, Doctor. Jeremy interrupted. Oh right, sorry everyone. The doctor said a bit embarrassed. All I was going to say was that I knew Jeremy had been there because I saw he had a small medal that only the most gifted campers would receive at the end of the summer. I've got my own right here. The doctor said pulled out his own medal from his pocket, while Jeremy pulled out his. Holding them up the gang could see that they almost looked identical. But let's not get lost in memories. It's not long time now before the big reveal will begin. Dr. Dinkleyberg said, and put the medal back into his pocket, and started to walk towards the press room. The rest of the gang and Jeremy followed. Inside the press room sat all of the other people who worked in the building as well as a bunch of people that were coming from the press. The room itself was very rectangular, formed with the stage for speaking in one end, and the only door leading out in the other end. On the stage stood a typical platform with microphones for speeches with some red curtains behind it hiding the rest of the scene. The door on the other side of the room was guarded by 2 guards with guns. As the doctor, the gang, and Jeremy was making their way towards the room, Jeremy suddenly froze still. Feeling his pockets frenetically, Jeremy started to get a very panicky look in his eyes. What's wrong? Daphne asked. My medal. I can't feel my medal. Jeremy said, almost shouting. I must have lost it on the way here. I had to find it before some cleaning lady tosses it into the trash, Jeremy said before running back the way they came. Jeremy. Velma shouted, trying to chase him before her uncle stopped her. No, let him go. I also know how much of an emotional worth that medal has. Jeremy will probably be back in time. As the gang and the doctor enter the room, they see that there are almost no empty chairs left. I guess you have to take whatever you can get. I have to go and prepare myself for my speech. Dr. Dinkleyberg said before heading towards the stage. Looking through the crowd, the gang found 5 empty chairs, 3 next to each other for Fred, Daphne and Velma to have, and 2 chairs next to each other that Shaggy and Scooby could have. The only problem was that they had to sit in each end of the room. While Fred and the girls didn't have any problems with it, Shaggy and Scooby had a huge problem, and that was the person sitting behind them. It was no other than the creepy lady from the reception. Hey Scooby, do you have any idea who is sitting behind us? Shaggy asked as he leaned over to Scooby next to him. No, Ro. That creepy lady who sat in the reception. Hey, are you here? Of course I'm sure. Look behind you, just do it carefully. Nervously Scooby took and slowly turned his head around to look, only to quickly turn it back to Shaggy. Ray Raggy. Yes, what? Re isn't here. Looking quickly behind himself, Shaggy almost jumped a little in surprise when he saw that the chair behind them was empty. Zoinks! She really can disappear from nowhere, Shaggy said as he and Scooby hugged each other for protection. Shortly after it was time for Dr. Dinkleyberg to do his presentation, he did a quick check on his papers before starting. Ladies and gentlemen, what I am going to be presenting here for you today is something that will change the world of science as we know it. It will be the next big milestone through medicine. It may receive a Nobel Prize even. What I will give you that are behind these curtain behind me is. Before he could say anything more, the lighting in the room went out. At first all you could hear was the sound of everybody wondering what was happening, but then a big roaring sound silenced everybody. It sounded like some kind of wild animal, but as something they had never seen before. When the light came back on, everybody became scared for their lives when they saw the source to the sound. On stage with the doctor was now some kind of weird dog-like creature that stood 8 feet tall on its hind legs and had big claws and fangs. But the most striking thing about it was that while it had huge arms and legs that were normal for its size, it also had a big hanging gut in the middle of its body. The doctor dodged himself out of the way as the monster took a big leap towards the crowd. Everybody escaped their chairs as the beast slammed down into 10 of the chairs, crushing them under its huge weight. The guards tried to shot at the thing, but the bullets just flew off it without doing any harm. The monster then took off towards the doors, breaking through them, and escaped down the hallway. Afterwards the place looked like a hurricane had gone through it. There was chairs that had been crushed by the monster, walls that had both claw marks and gunshots, and there were marks from both the creature's paws and from its belly pressed into the floor. The only people left after the chaos was Dr. Dinkleyberg and the mystery gang. Velma was quick to rush over to her uncle to see if he was okay. "Are you alright, uncle?" Velma asked. "Yes, my dear, I'm okay." "What kind of weird thing was that?" Daphne asked. "I don't know, but it looked like it had had itself a huge meal before getting here, and I think we should get away before it feels 4 seconds. Shaggy said, as he and Scooby tried to get away before being stopped by Velma. "No, we can't leave now when my uncle is in need for our help." "You know what that means, gang?" Fred said. "Oh no, he's going to say it, isn't he?" Shaggy sighed, before Fred said, "Looks like we got ourselves another mystery." Part 3. Shortly after Fred had said that, the gang heard that someone was returning to the press room. Looking at the cracked up entrance, they saw Jeremy approach, half jogging and half breathless. "Haha, sorry I'm late. I looked everywhere for my medal, but I couldn't find it. Have I missed anything important?" Jeremy said as he slowly started to see that the place didn't look like it used to. "What did I miss?" Jeremy shouted, shocked. "Here looks like a hurricane has gone loose, and Dr. Dinkleyberg, are you alright?" he said as he rushed to the doctor, almost knocking Velma out of the way as she was helping her uncle to get on his feet again. "I'm fine, Jeremy, I'm fine." "But what happened? What on earth did happen here?" Jeremy asked, both confused and scared. "Would you believe us if we told you that there was a big dog-like creature that looked like it had been eating a whole buffet before getting here that had trashed the room?" Fred asked. Jeremy just started awkwardly at Fred for a moment before saying, "Probably not, but I guess you wouldn't be making something that strange up to me. Have I also missed something?" A voice suddenly said behind Shaggy and Scooby, who both jumped to the sides of surprise. It was Clara, who had once again suddenly appeared in the room silently, sipping on a coffee. Like zoinks, "Where did you come from?" Shaggy shouted. "From the entrance, duh," Clara said as she took another sip. "Say, you weren't present at the press conference either when the monster attacked." Fred realized. "We know why Jeremy couldn't make it, but why did you have to leave?" "Felt that I needed a coffee," Clara answered calmly. "Thought this was going to be a long dragged out thing, so I decided to walk off to get a coffee and then walk back." "So you didn't see the monster leave the room before returning?" Daphne asked. "No, I didn't see any kind of monster," Clara answered, "but that would explain why this place looks like it became the result of a typhoon." Seeing something strange, Velma crouched down to look at the crush mark the monster left when it landed on the floor. "What have you found, Velma?" Fred asked. I see something strange in the marks the monster left. What do you see? Daphne asked. It leaves not only marks of its paws, but also from its belly on the floor, but the strange thing is that the mark from the belly seems to be deeper than the marks from the paws. Which means? Fred asked. That there was more weight and force in the belly than in the paws. Velma said, like, no offense to your way of thinking, Velma, Shaggy added, but did you see that thing? It was so enormous that it made Scooby look slim in comparison. No offense, Scoob. Shaggy said, looking at Scooby, who frowned back at Shaggy. Wait. Clara says, you're saying that this creature that was here looked a bit like him, pointing at Scooby, but bigger? Yes, why do you wonder? Velma asks. Well, I think what is running around here could be the failed experiment. Gulp, the failed experiment? Shaggy asked, scared. Yes. Clara answered. The story talks about an experiment taking place here about a dog, which was having a bit of a weight problem. The doctors were testing a new medicine that would help making all extra weight on a dog to instantly disappear, but something went horrible wrong. Instead of losing its weight, the dog became taller, wider, and more evil. It became an uncontrolled monster that burst out of the experiment room and disappeared into the building. Since then a few people have claimed to seen it moving around in the shadows, but no real proofs have been made, until now. Excuse me. Fred interrupted, but who do you know about this whole backstory? I have been picking up a few rumors and stories about this place by listening on all the gossips the other employers say. So you intentionally overhears when your colleagues are talking to each other? Daphne asked. What can I say? It is things like this that makes getting to work so much more interesting. Clara answered. Now, if I can go back to my working place right now? Are you not afraid of the monster running around in here? Dr. Dinkleyberg asked. I don't want to risk leaving my workplace and get a phone call the next day saying I'm fired because of it. I'll take my chances with this overfed pup any day. Clara said and walked away towards the reception. Well, if we are going to get anywhere solving this we need to start look after clues. Fred said. Daphne and Velma go and look for clues as one group, and Shaggy you and Scooby look for clues together. Sigh, isn't it always that way things goes? Shaggy asked Scooby as Fred and the girl went to look around in test labs and workers' offices for clues. Shaggy and Scooby knew just the right place for them to look. The company's dining hall. Being a big place with hundreds of employees, it had a huge dining hall. A good place for someone to hide clues, Shaggy hinted to Scooby as they both walked towards it. After the monster attack earlier, nearly everybody who worked there had left the building, leaving the whole place for Shaggy and Scooby to have for themselves. As they walked through the hall they saw something that hooked their interest. The storage room for the food. Having around 100 employees also means that the amount of food being served daily must be astronomical. Opening the door to the storage room, Shaggy and Scooby's wildest dreams came true. Inside was probably the biggest room filled with food they've ever seen, and just like the last place they did this on, there was only one door in and out of it that they could lock up tight. Scooby was on his way to rush over and eat when Shaggy stops him by grabbing his collar. No, Scooby, do you remember what the other in the gang told you after the camp incident? Shaggy asked Scooby. Sigh, to not read anything in my current rendition. Scooby said disappointed. Listen Scooby, I know I don't like it either for you to not being allowed to feast on food like before, but you must understand that we only do this because we care about you. You're only rowing rise because you're afraid I'll take you in another eating competition. Scooby mumbled angrily. What? No, we're doing it because we want to help your health, and besides there's no way you would win over me again. Shaggy said convinced. Renryron Triuron Tatio Ralinjari me? Scooby asked teasingly. Because I promised the others to keep you in place. Shaggy said, starting to become annoyed. Risrit because you reckon? Scooby said cocky. This touched a very sensitive spot on Shaggy that thought about either keeping the word to his friends, or to keep his pride. After a moment of thinking about it, Shaggy turned to Scooby and said, let's do it. And with that, Shaggy and Scooby had a new eating competition. Both sides worked hard trying to gather as much food around them and eat it as fast as possible, but like last time, Shaggy had to find himself defeated by Scooby. This time it was because Scooby's body, thanks to his added weight, now had more room for food, leaving Shaggy as big at the end of their previous feast, and Scooby twice as big as before they started, while he had earlier been able to walk almost normally. Despite his big hanging belly, he was now struggling a lot in just trying to have the strength to walk with his now super-sized middle. As Shaggy tried desperately to keep up the pace with Scooby, he reached behind him and grabbed a box filled with what looked to be crackers, but stopping it into his mouth and tried chewing, Shaggy felt something very hard and metallic. Spitting it out, Shaggy took some other of that stuff and looked at it. It was small and flat and filled with all kinds of little electronics. Grabbing the box from where he had found them, Shaggy read Electro's electrical data chips on the label. Why would someone like to hide data chips in here? Shaggy asked. I want on now. Scooby answered. After thinking for a moment, Shaggy suddenly said, I think it's a clue. A clue? Scooby said, surprised. Why so surprised, Scooby? I told you that this was the place to find clues. Shaggy said in triumph. As Shaggy and Scooby got themselves up from the floor, Shaggy opened the door to look out over the dining hall. Think the coast is clear, he whispered as both he and Scooby started to walk out of the storage room, while carrying the small box of data chips. Even so, it didn't take long before they both heard a familiar sound, the sound of a door slamming shut, followed by the angry growl of a wild beast. Looking back slowly, Shaggy and Scooby saw the same overweight dog creature that he'd been seen at the press conference. Feeling a bit deja vu at first, Shaggy and Scooby then found the will to start running. Despite their once again stuffed bodies, they both managed to pick up a great pace as the monster was chasing them. They were just as surprised over the monster being able to pick up its speed just as the monster was over theirs. Just like last time they had a chase, Shaggy saw something blocking their path. This time it was an area of the place that was under construction, and one of the planks was hanging out to the side, just like that branch at the campsite. Just like last time, Shaggy forced the thing blocking out of the way, and had it flying back towards Scooby again. This time Scooby remembered what to do, and dodged under it, sending it instead into the face of the monster, which tumbled over because of the impact, and gave Shaggy and Scooby a chance to escape. After running for a while, they both hid around a corner to get a chance to catch their breaths. Looking down on himself, Shaggy saw that he had once again lost his extra weight thanks to the running. Works every time, Shaggy was saying until he saw Scooby, and saw that while he had lost all the weight he gained during this eating, he still had the same overweight as before the started. Fred and the girls on the other hand had found their own kind of clue, footmarks from the monster. As they followed it, they found out that it led them to what seemed like someone's office. Before going in, Daphne looked around the entrance, and said, Wait a minute, I recognize this place. This is the same place from we stood waiting with your uncle while his assistants went in to get the secret project. Yes, you're right, Fred said. This is the same place, but why would a monster want to break in here? Maybe there is something in here that it wants, Velma said, and entered the room first. Looking inside, Velma didn't see any monster inside, and told the others that the coast is clear. As they walked in, they all saw that the whole room was a mess. There was paper spread all over the floor, tables and shelves tipped over, and foot stamps and claw marks on the floor and the walls. But in all this chaos there still was a bit of a clear path to follow. The steps on the floor lead to a safe that was mounted on one of the walls, ripped open and emptied by its content. Velma leaned over to get a closer look, and Fred asked, What do you think was in there? I don't know, Velma answered, but if we could find out what was in this safe to begin with, and why the monster would like to steal it, we might be close to solving this mystery. Walking back trying to find the gang and show them the clue that they found, Shaggy and Scooby walked right past the desk from where Clara was working, or rather would be working if she had been there. Like Scooby, Shaggy said, that creepy lady who sits there isn't there. Do you know what that means? No, Raggy, I don't, Scooby answered. If she isn't here, where is she? Shaggy asked. She's probably running around this place dressed up as the failed experiment. It took a few seconds for Scooby to understand how Shaggy was thinking, but as soon as he understood, he was completely thinking along the same lines as his friend. Are you real? He asked. Of course I am. It fits so perfectly. Shaggy said, we were chased by the thing just a few moments ago, and now we're here with no Clara working. As Shaggy went on, Scooby became more and more convinced that Shaggy was right. Yeah, you're right, Clara is the monster. We have to find the gang and show them Scoob. Shaggy said as both he and Scooby run off to find the rest of the gang. They didn't have to run more than to the next room to find them. Hey guys, did you find any clues? Fred asked. Better than that, we find proof of who did it. Shaggy said eagerly. Really? Fred and the girls said surprised. Yeah, and you will never believe who it is. Shaggy said excited. It's Lara. Scooby said just as excited as Shaggy. Oh Scoob, you just revealed it. Shaggy said disappointed. Rops, Rory Raggy. Scooby said feeling bad. Wait. Fred said, you're saying that Clara is the monster? Yes, that's what we've been saying. Shaggy said, do you have any proof to that she is the monster? Velma asked. Well, not exactly. Shaggy said a bit defeated, but we were chased by the monster just recently very near the place where Clara works, and when we walked past it she wasn't there. That actually sounds like too much of a coincidence to not be related. Fred said, we can show you, her workplace is just around this corner. Shaggy said, as both he and Scooby dragged their friends with them. As the gang got back to Clara's working place, they found her sitting on her chair, working on her computer, and this proves. Fred said, we swear she wasn't there a minute ago. Shaggy and Scooby said, I couldn't help hearing that you were talking about me. Clara's voice interrupted. So was it anything special you wanted, or did you just come here to disturb me? It's just our friends thinking you weren't here earlier, thinking you were chasing them around as the monster. Fred explained, well I never. Clara said, sounding really angry, you two have the gut to go and spread rumors about me, thinking you can accuse me for doing things I haven't done. I have done nothing else but to sit here, working on my computer, sipping my coffee, ever since I got back from the press conference. Feeling really sacred of her now, Shaggy and Scooby took and hid behind Fred, who said, we're sorry for interrupting you, and we shall leave you all alone now. Walking away from the reception, Shaggy and Scooby looked at their friends and said, you have to believe us, we would never lie to you, and she really wasn't sitting there earlier. Hushing them, Fred pulled them closer to him and whispered, listen, we believe you guys. You do? Shaggy and Scooby asked surprised. When you two were getting scolded by Clara, Velma saw something very suspicious on her desk. She did? Shaggy and Scooby asked as they looked over at Velma. While Clara was distracted by you two, I saw that her coffee looked both cold and untouched, meaning that she must have left her workplace for a while to do something else. Velma explained. Then why did you guys not say that to her? Shaggy asked. Because we didn't want her to know that we're suspecting her. If she only thinks you two guys were believing something and later dropped it, she would think she was much safer now. Fred said, but anyway, did you find any other clues? Velma asked. Yes, we found a box full with data chips that someone had hid. Shaggy said, and showed them the box. Why would someone want to hide data chips? Fred asked. Especially when most of the machines they use here is already built and installed before being shipped here. Velma said, what shall we do now? Daphne asked. We should try and find Dr. Dinkleberg and ask him about the contents that was in that safe. Fred said, after searching for some time they found the doctor wandering by himself in the hallways. Uncle. Velma shouted to get his attention. Oh, hello Velma, have you and your friends made any progress in solving this mystery? The doctor asked. We are making progress, yes, Velma said, but we are having some problems that I think only you can help us with. And what would that be? The doctor asked. We believe that the reason for the monster doing this might have to do with whatever you and your assistant Jeremy was working on, and if we are going to be able to solve it we need to know what secret project you were planning to show earlier. The doctor took a deep sigh and put his hands into his coat pockets. I know this thing I was working on wouldn't create so much trouble if as few people as possible knew about it, but seeing how things are now I think it would be best if I tell you kids now. The secret project I have been working on this whole time is, just as the doctor was about to say it, the monster dog creature burst out of the floor, grabbed the doctor and dragged him down into the dark of the cellar. Uncle no! Exclamation. Velma screamed as she tried to grab his hand before vanishing, while the gang tried to comfort Velma, who was feeling devastated on seeing her uncle get dragged underground by the monster. They heard the sound of someone approaching from behind them. Turning around they saw that it was Jeremy running as fast as he could towards them. I heard the sound of thing getting destroyed, and a growl from a beast. What happened? The monster suddenly appeared from the ground, and took Dr. Dinkleyberg down with it. Fred explained. No, exclamation. That's not true. Tell me it's not true. Jeremy said while starting to get another panic attack. Take it easy, Fred said trying to calm him down. You were nowhere near when it happened, so there was nothing you could do about it. Speaking of which, why didn't you keep him company and tried to protect him? Velma asked upset. I wanted to, but he insisted on telling me that he could handle himself, and after a while I gave in and let him be. You did it because you trusted him, Jeremy. Fred said. It's in no way your fault. Thanks, Fred, Jeremy said, getting calmer. I think I'll go and clear my head a little. Jeremy said, and walked down the corridor and around a corner. While Jeremy was leaving, the gang were all turning their heads at his way, facing away from the pit that the monster had created, and as they did that a couple of glowing eyes were being visible in the dark. Seeing Scooby's tail waving above the hole, the creature inside reached out its hand and grabbed it. Scooby yelped in pain, and before anyone of the gang had time to react, Scooby was dragged into the hole. Everyone of the gang just stood shocked over what's happened except Shaggy, who reached his head into the hole and shouted, Scooby-Doo! Part 4. The first instinct for Shaggy to do in this situation would have been to jump down the hole and follow Scooby, but the rest of the gang stopped him from doing it. Let me go, Scooby needs me. Shaggy whined as he tried to get free from his friend's grip. No, if you do that you will only get captured like Scooby. Fred said, if we're going to follow we need to do it together, and to do that we need to get down there in a safer way, and to do that we need to go and get some flashlights from the mystery machine before entering. Shaggy got himself calmed down and realized they were right. If he had just tossed himself down there the monster might have waited for him to take him as well. After taking some deep breaths Shaggy looked at Fred and the girls and said, okay, let's do it. The last things he remembers was standing with the rest of the gang next to a hole that was created by the monster, and then a clawed arm reached out and grabbed his tail and dragged him in, and then just darkness. As he woke up, Scooby saw that he was in a completely different place now. The room was all white colored, filled with test tubes and chemical bottles and other things stacked up on racks. There didn't seem to be any real exit either, except for a big thick metal door that looked impossible to move, and some big windows on one wall that you could only see your own reflection on. This place seemed to be used as a test room, and now it had Scooby as its prisoner. Where am I? Scooby asked as he was slowly waking up. As the gang entered the cellar they had prepared themselves now with flashlights that they had got from the mystery machine, which proved to be a smart move, since the power to the lighting down there didn't seem to work. As they stepped down carefully and searched the area they found the hole from where the monster had appeared, but sadly no Scooby was to be found. Searching the area around for clues, Velma stumbled upon something that made her eyes teary. Seeing this, the others rushed over asking what it was, and she showed them what looked like some kind of round, flat, gold-like object with big claw marks over it. It's my uncle's medal. Velma said, half crying. Don't cry, Velma, I guarantee that we will find your uncle again, alive and well. Fred said, giving Velma a comfort hug. and I think we will find him being like, protected by Scooby. Shaggy added, and joined the hug. We will all make sure that nothing bad will ever happen to anyone that is a friend or family to us. Daphne said, and joined the others. Thanks guys. Velma said, wiping a tear from her eyes. It really means a lot to have your support. Let's now go and solve this mystery, once and for all. Slowly getting up on his legs, Scooby looked around trying to find an exit. He tried to move the door, but that seemed impossible. He tried to break the windows, but the glass was too thick to be cracked. Looking up at the ceiling, Scooby saw what could be a way to get out. A ventilation shaft with a big shelf filled with chemicals next to it. If I are limit I are might get out of here. Scooby knew and decided to give it a try. As he started to try and climb it, he found that something was blocking him from keeping his body near the shelf and getting a better grip. Looking down, he found out that, once again, the one to blame was his fatted up stomach. Trying to press it in between the floors of the shelf, Scooby made his best try to press himself closer to the shelf. The shelf was about 13 feet tall, and the higher Scooby got, the more unsteady it became. Just as he was reaching for the top shelf, Scooby grabbed a big vial instead, making him lose his balance and fall off. As he hit the floor, the vial went out of his paw and shattered on the floor. As it shattered, Scooby could feel a great smell come out of it. He could also see that the vial had contained some kind of weird blue liquid, which was now spreading out on the floor. The smell was unknown to Scooby, but it had such a strong and hypnotic effect on him that he was dragged towards it. Without better judgment, Scooby started to lick the strange blue liquid, which he found to be in surprisingly good taste. Being in a drug-like state, Scooby decided to just continue licking up all of the liquid that was stored in the vial. If he had only looked at the label for it, he would have seen that it read, Lardo's fat increaser, made to help dangerously thin dogs to get into normal-sized shape by multiplying the fat cells in their body based on their size. Warning! Exclamation. Has a very strong effect, so only use a small amount of it when being used. The fact that Scooby already had an overweight size, and that he was taking in the entire content of the bottle at once, made this whole thing lined up for disaster. Another important thing Scooby didn't know was that the medicine also had things in it that was made to make the taker fall asleep, to help the drugs take more effect. And since he once again took down the entire vial, Scooby started to feel asleep already. He didn't want to, but his whole body was against him, as it collapsed on the floor with only his eyes still working ever so slightly. I must rinse. Scooby managed to say before falling asleep. As the gang got out of the cellar, Daphne asked Velma what they should do next. Velma answered that the only one now that knows anything about what the monster wants is Jeremy, and that they need to find him quickly before the monster does so. Luckily for them, they happened to run across Jeremy just around the corner and confront him. Jeremy, we need your help. Fred said, no problems, just tell me what it is you want. Jeremy said calmly, we need you to tell us what the Doctor's secret project is about. You're the only one left who knows anything about it, and could possibly be the key to solve it. Velma said. Jeremy's previously calm expression had now become a bit more unsure and nervously when Velma started to bring up the secret project again. I don't think I can tell you that. The Doctor made me promise to keep it a secret for anyone who would ask anything about it. Please, both Scooby and the Doctor has been taken away by the monster, Daphne said, and then let Shaggy fill in. And if we don't manage to solve this mystery, we might never see any of them again. Everyone's begging finally made Jeremy give in and tells them, okay, I swear this is all I know. The Doctor has been working on some kind of medicine formula that he had said would revolutionize the whole medicine world. From what I got to see of it, looked like a strange green jelly tonic looking substance in a test tube. My main duty became to observe it in test runs and tell the Doctor what was happening and what numbers were shown on computers without any real clue to what this thing was supposed to be doing. Once it was finished, and suddenly one day the Doctor tells me that everything was done and that there was going to be a big press conference some days later to reveal the project to the world. Then when that day came, I was asked to pick it out a sample from the Doctor's safe and carry it to the press room. That's when I got to meet you kids, and since then we both know what has happened here. Are you sure there isn't anything left of this strange substance the doctor was working on? Velma asked. Yes, or wait, Jeremy said, stopping to think. I think I left a sample of it in the lab for continued analyses. It may still be there. Could you take and lead us to it? Velma asked. Of course, follow me. Jeremy said as he and the gang went off to the lab room for analyses. When they finally reached the place, they were all on the lookout in case the monster would suddenly appear as they entered. Once inside, they found things to be all messy like they had in the office room they had been in earlier, but this time it could be the result of the people working there having a stressful time getting out, escaping from the monster. So, where would this last sample of the medicine lay hidden? Velma asked Jeremy. After I have done the daily analyzing of it, I keep it hidden in a small safe that is hidden behind a painting. And where do you have that painting? Fred asked. Right there. Jeremy said, surprised seeing the painting still hanging at its place. So far so good. Jeremy said as he removed the painting and started to put in the combination to the safe. After putting in the numbers, Jeremy opened the safe door and reached in and grabbed the sample. Here it is, he said, holding a small transparent box containing a small lump of the green rubbery substance. Finally some luck on our side, Shaggy said, relieved. Now all we need is to prepare a trap for the monster, and then this mystery is solved. Fred said. After sleeping for what feel like days, Scooby wakes up to see that he's still trapped in the same testing room, but something feels different now. Just moving his head around felt a lot slower and harder than it did before. Next thing he tried to do was to lift his body off the ground and stand up. Scooby knew something wasn't right when he could feel that his legs too felt very stiff and hard to move. After getting them in place, he could feel another problem. This time it was a sudden huge weight that made getting his body up standing almost impossible. It was like someone had put on him hundreds of backpacks filled with rocks on his back. Finally he found the strength to lift himself up. After much hard work he finally managed to get his legs into a position of supporting the big weight. He then tried to take some steps and heard a creaking sound from the floor. He had to take small and careful steps if he didn't want to break through the floor. He managed to take a few careful small steps as he turned around so he could see himself in the reflecting windows, and what he saw almost made his eyes fall out of its sockets, and his jaw to hit the floor. Thanks to licking up all of that blue weight gain liquid, Scooby's body had been through some literally enormous changes. The first thing he saw was his face, which was now very round and filling. His once long snout and mouth now looked like it had been sunken into the rest of his head, but it was actually his fatted face that had been growing outwards, making it more plain and smooth in the form. Even his once flat cheeks had been swollen up to make the round shape of it complete. He also started to feel that it was a bit harder for him to breathe now. Looking at his super thick throat, he could see why. The added chins and neck rolls had made his once oversized collar to now feel like it was sitting so tight around his neck that it was actually starting to choke him a little. Run till I get our back to our normal, I'll rave to our get our bigger our collar. Scooby though with great shame. Looking further down he could see how his chest had become wider and was almost touching the ground, and that was still nothing compared to his stomach. The thing that had already been big and round ever since this whole thing started, had now taken on a whole new level of fatness. It was so big and fat in so many kinds of directions that it was without any doubt the place where literally half of his total weight was. A big round part of it was still rubbing the floor as Scooby stood up. Probably so big that Scooby in his old, skinny state would have been able to fit into the area. It was so wide that it made his already widespread and fleshy legs to stand out even wider. It was so big that it even had a big hump of fat being stored on his back, because it had run out of space to grow down or to the sides. Look like some kind of red, dog camel, with our thighs hump on my back. Scooby said, embarrassed to himself. Feeling he had seen enough, Scooby started to take a few careful steps to move away from the mirrors, only to stop again to see from the side who his backside looks like. He didn't expect anything different compared to the rest of his body, but it was still just as much of a blow to him to see giant rump he was now sported. It was so big and wide now that he could probably fool anyone looking at him from behind to believe that he actually was a brown-furred hippo. Even funnier was the fact that his tail still almost looked the same as before, being a little bit rounder and thicker than last time seeing it, but still nowhere as huge as everything else on his body, and seeing it just lay there like a big thick hot dog between his huge buns made Scooby chuckle a little by the image. He smiled by the fact that he was still being able to find something to laugh at even in this kind of situation. Back in the press room, where they had seen the monster the first time, the gang was now preparing a trap to catch it in. While Fred was going around the room measuring its area and ceiling height, Velma was just looking closer at the stage where the monster had made its appearance, trying to find the same spot as Dr. Dinkleyberg had been standing on during the whole incident. Velma saw something reflecting on the floor to the side of the stage. Getting on the stage, Velma walked over to the item and bent down to pick it up. She looked at it for a moment before saying, "Guys, I think I found another clue." Very quickly the rest of the gang gathered around Velma to see what it was she had found. Holding it up for them, Velma showed them a small round flat medal that looked like the one they found in the cellar after losing the doctor, only this one looked to be unharmed compared to the other one. "It's a medal," Daphne said. "It looks like the one we found in the cellar." Fred added, "But this one isn't damaged by a crazy medical experiment." Shaggy finished. "The description also tells us that this medal actually belongs to Jeremy," Velma revealed. "But didn't he say that he lost it on the way to the press room?" Daphne asked, confused. "So why would we find his medal laying here if he never managed to get here before us?" Fred added, "I don't know, but this thing only raises more questions." Velma said, "Still, we got to keep our focus on putting up a trap to catch the monster." Fred said, "Speaking of which, I have just figured out the perfect way to catch it. I could prepare it and build it very quickly, and the only thing missing is someone that would be prepared to go out there and lure the monster here. I'll do it," Shaggy suddenly said before Fred had a chance to finish. "You do?" All three of the remaining gang said, surprised to Shaggy's volunteering. "Yeah, when my friend Scooby's life is on stake, I'm prepared to do anything," Shaggy said before walking out the door and out through the corridors. "I'll never seen Shaggy be acting so brave before," Daphne said, still surprised over Shaggy's actions. "He and Scooby have a special bond that almost no powers in the world can tear apart," Fred explained. As Shaggy made his way through the dimly lighted corridors, he thought about that horrible moment of seeing Scooby's terrifying face expression before he was dragged down into the hole. Thinking about it made Shaggy even more determined to catch this monster, solve this mystery, and get Scooby back safe and fine. The sheer anger and rage by the know his best friend being in danger made Shaggy feel that nothing was impossible. He could take on anyone. He could make it through every kind of obstacle. He could. Bump. Being too lost in his own thoughts, Shaggy walked straight into something that was very big and furry. Taking a step back and looking up, he saw that he had made contact with the big hanging belly that belonged to the dog creature. Its red loving eyes stared at him, and it was showing him his razor-sharp teeth. That was enough for Shaggy to lose all the courage he previously had, and made him run back as fast as possible with the monster now chasing him. "And that's it, done," Fred said as he made a final rope knot. "When Shaggy and the monster runs through the door, they are going to trigger the rope that is put up right at the bottom. Doing that will release a heavy weight that in turn is attached to another rope that has a net in the other end on the floor. So when the weight goes down, the net comes up, and voila, the monster is trapped. Just make sure that you don't catch Shaggy as well. I don't think he would like to share the trap with the monster," Daphne said. Meanwhile, Velma was looking at the two medals that belonged to both Jeremy and the doctor. While doing so, she suddenly saw something that made her both shocked and surprised by it. "Fred, Daphne," she shouted, "I think I just figured out who's behind it all. It's But before she could say it, they all heard the sound of Shaggy screaming in fear and the monster roaring after him. "Take cover!" Fred shouted as they all three got into safe distance from where the trap would have effect. As they did so, they could hear that both Shaggy and the monster was only around the cover to prevent Shaggy from getting trapped as well. Fred shouted, "Jump over the rope, Shaggy!" With only seconds to react, Shaggy saw the rope and jumped over it, while the monster ran through it. The trap worked as perfect with the weight falling and the net rising. Just like with the rope earlier, Shaggy jumped over the net just moments before the monster was over it and got caught. It got trapped inside and was hoisted up a couple of meters in the air. The gang celebrated that they had caught the monster for at least a couple of seconds before they heard a snapping sound. Looking up, they saw that the rope that was supposed to hold up the monster had snapped by the enormous weight the creature sported, and now the monster was free with no backup plan to catch it. As it hit the floor, the gang saw something fall out from the monster's side, a big box with a small lock attached to it. Getting out of the net, the monster picked up the box, and then took and trapped the gang in a corner, preparing to end them all. Back at the secret testing room, Scooby wondered how he was supposed to get himself out and find his friends when he could barely move, partly because of how his weight was weakening his legs, and partly because if he moved too much he would break the floor, and would probably hurt himself a lot. While wondering, he suddenly heard a weak noise coming from underneath him. It sounded like screams of his friends and the roaring of a monster. It was that. It was his friends screaming and the monster roaring. Wherever he was, his friends were under him and in need of his help now. Ignoring how he was going to hurt himself, Scooby took a deep breath and used all the strength that he had to make his whole body jump. It was probably just an inch high, but when his body touched the floor, it just gave away under the pressure. Just as the monster was going to attack both it and the gang noticed that the ceiling was about to fall down. Before anybody could react, a small hole was opening up, and a big brown furry thing fell down, hitting the stage with such force that it made the whole room shake violently. So violently that both the box that the gang was carrying and the one that the monster was hit the floor and broke open. Inside the gang's box was the small remain sample of the mysterious new jelly-like medicine they had got from Jeremy, and in the monster's box was all of the remaining ones that had been stolen earlier. It looked just like the one the gang had, except it was a 10 times bigger piece. To compare, the one from the gang's box was about as big as a marble, while the one from the monster's box was as big as a tennis ball. The big shaking in that lead to both the boxes to hit the floor and go open, also lead to make the balls to start bounce around widely in the room. Everyone tried to take cover and avoid getting hurt by them, except for Fred and the monster that had picked up their boxes and tried to catch them inside. Looking around in confusion, Shaggy saw the big fat thing that had landed on the stage and asked, almost scared, "Scoob? Hey hee hee, hi Shaggy." Scooby said, a bit embarrassed through his puffed up cheeks and extra chins. Fred managed to catch the small ball flying around in his box before the bigger one also found its own home. Before anybody, especially Scooby, could do anything, the big ball of the jelly medicine took a strange angle in a bounce and flew with great speed right into Scooby's mouth and down his throat. "No!" exclamation. The monster shouted in a somewhat muffled down and electric kind of voice. The jelly-like substance found itself bouncing around madly in Scooby's insides before it died down, making Scooby's stomach its prison. The monster was now furious and was about to take them all out when Scooby suddenly started to shake violently. He was looking like he was in a lot of pain, and he was shouting like a dog in pain. Whatever he had just swallowed seemed to do something with his body. There was sounds of bones snapping, and some of his body parts like the back and his legs were changing shape. He also looked like he was growing in length. It all happened so fast that after only around 15 seconds Scooby stopped moving. "Scoob!" exclamation. Shaggy shouted, and was on his way to help him when the monster blocked their way and started to move towards them. Feeling once again like they were done for, Shaggy shouted once again, "Scooby-Doo, help us!" Opening his eyes, Scooby felt like he was filled with new energy. Looking to his side, he saw the monster on its way to kill his friends when he shouted, "Ray Ryu, stay away from our MY Reens." and before either the gang or the monster knew what was going on, Scooby pressed his front paws into the stage floor, pushed hard, and swung his body up so he stood on his hind legs. It was a sight that was almost impossible to believe, with his big huge frame managing to be held up by his two equally large hind legs. Scooby stood at a height of 8 feet. He was even bigger than the monster now, which looked very scared right now. Scooby jumped on the stage and landed on the solid concrete floor, sending another smaller shockwave through the room. With every step he took to get closer to the monster, the more afraid of facing this giant of dogs the monster became, but it was still too afraid of moving itself. When Scooby finally stood face to face with the monster, or rather the monster's face against Scooby's huge stomach, he looked down and saw the monster giving him a look of plead. Scooby's response was to suck in his gut slightly and then shoot it out with such force that it sent the monster flying straight into one of the walls on the other side of the room. The collision with the wall was so hard that Scooby and the gang could see how the red eyes of the beast died down and then turned off completely. Feeling like the beast was finished now, Scooby took and went back to walk on all four. It was still more comfortable for him. "You did it, Scoob. You defeated the monster," Shaggy said, happy to see Scooby still living. "But what has happened to you?" Daphne asked, shocked. "I just licked on some strange chemicals. Maybe I shouldn't rave on that," Scooby said, making his huge cheeks blush a little. "Whatever happened to you made you as strong as an ox. You just took care of that big beast in one powerful move," Fred said, impressed. While getting all of this attention from his friends, Scooby saw Velma was ignoring him and instead was walking up to the monster, which was still laying there. What are you doing, Velma?" Scooby asked, finding out who the person behind this whole thing is. Velma answered, as she was searching the creature's unconscious body. "No need to do that, since we already know who's behind it, right, Scoob?" Shaggy said, "Yeah, it's our Clara." Scooby added, "No, it's not her, it's Jeremy." Fred said, "We found his medal lying on the floor next to where the monster first appeared." Daphne added, "You're all wrong." Velma said, "What?" They all asked, confused. Velma pressed a button hidden on the side of the monster that opened up a secret door built inside its belly. "Sadly, the one behind it all is my uncle," Velma said sadly, as it was revealed that not only was the monster a robot, but it was actually her uncle sitting inside driving it, Dr. Dinkleberg. Everyone said, surprised. After getting the police called to the place to arrest him, the gang and the rest of the suspects were all gathered to get to know what had actually been happening. "How did you figure out it was me who was behind it all?" he asked. "At first I was hinted on the truth of your creature when Shaggy and Scooby found data chips hidden in the food storage room, but the thing that made it all clear was being reminded by the medal you got for your talent in building technology," Velma explained. "But we thought that Jeremy was the guilty one because we found his medal in press room, and the one belonging to your uncle was found scratched and damaged," Fred told Velma, confused. "Actually," Velma said, and reached inside the doctor's shirt. "He still has his medal here," and pulled the medal out of his shirt. "He was trying to make it look like Jeremy was the one who did it, and that he himself had fallen victim to the monster." "But who did you manage to see that it wasn't my real medal?" the doctor asked. "After taking a closer look, I saw that the ruined medal was missing a small emblem of the camp's logo that the one belonging to Jeremy had," Velma explained. "But we saw him being present both when the monster attacked the first time, and then also get taken away by it. How's that even possible?" Shaggy asked, highly confused. "That was a bit trickier to figure out, but then I remember my uncle saying that he also learned how to build in remote controls to the things he built. He must in both cases have been hiding a remote control under his lab coat, and been controlling the thing's every movement," Velma explained, and found in one of his coat pockets the remote control in question. "But can someone explain to me why the great doctor would steal his own great invention, and then blame it on me?" Jeremy asked, feeling really confused. "Do you want to know the reason why I did it?" the doctor asked. "Yes, please, tell me," Jeremy answered. "Well," the doctor started, The reason to why I did this was because I dreamed of creating what would become the ultimate cure within medicine, and for a long time it looked like I was on my way to succeed. I had been developing a completely new and unique particle of mass. It was thought to become something that would be able to, once inside someone's body, it would start to spread itself, and make the one carrying the disease healthy again. It would be able to adapt to any kinds of diseases and other health issues, and take care of them. All I needed to do was figure out the very last equation to be able to make my dream a reality. This was around the same time when I had started to have Jeremy help me and have him do simple favors for me, and one day I found him working on something that was on my desk. I looked over and saw that it was my equation he was working on. I didn't thought much of it, since I hadn't been able to solve it in months. But once he left, I looked over and could not believe what I saw. He had solved it. I should have been happy over this, since it was my final goal to reach before being able to create it, but instead I felt scared over that, despite all of my hard work, Jeremy would get the honors of creating it, because he solved the missing link. I couldn't let it happen, so I used my knowledge of technology building, and remote controlling, and the old legend about the failed experiment to scare everybody away, and I stole it, and left after me tracks of Jeremy being the responsible one, and I would have gotten away with it, if it wasn't for you meddling kids, and your elephant in dog form. The doctor was then being taken away by the police while Jeremy shouted after him, "I'm sorry for making you think that I wanted to steal your invention from you, but I will make sure to let the world know that you were the brain behind it." Shaggy and Scooby then looked over at Clara, who had once again made an appearance with almost silently. "But if you were not the monster, then why would you always leave places so mysteriously without making a sound? Being the only one working at the reception in this tall building is very stressful. I needed to, once in a while, go off and take a smoke to cool my nerves," she answered. "But why do it so suspiciously?" Daphne asked. "If my boss found me smoking on my working time, I would be fired immediately," Clara answered. "Then it looks like everything is fixed now," Fred said. "Not everything," Velma added. What did we miss?" Fred asked. "We all came here in the first place to see how Scooby extra weight was affecting his health, and now look at him," Velma said, and pointed at Scooby. "Do you have any idea of how bad this must be to his health?" she asked. "We need to get him examined as quickly as possible." "I think I can do it for you," Jeremy said. "It's the least I can do for you solving this mystery." And such Jeremy had Scooby do a bunch of different tests to see how well his body was. He had him run a treadmill, test how much pressure his body could hold up, and take a blood sample and an x-ray. Once all the tests were done, both Jeremy and Scooby took and returned to the gang to tell them the results. "We have the results here, and they are, to say the least, very interesting," Jeremy said, half nervous for how they would all take the news. "You see, it turns out the doctor's revolutionized medicine wasn't actually finished. Samples from Scooby's DNA shows that, instead of taking care of the disease that the dog was having, it would change its owner's body to make it adapt to the condition instead. In a way, it was very lucky for Scooby that his biggest problem was his weight, because if he had been having a fever or a cold, it could have changed the temperature in his body, so he wouldn't be able to live in normal room temperature. Nevertheless, it still left some changes on him. After letting himself lick up an entire bottle of weight gain formula, his body started to already show some changes. He got a body weight that was meant for a dog at least 3 times his size, so once he got the medicine inside him, it started to give him the size that would hold his weight best. It made his spine longer and wider, it gave him a couple of extra ribs, and increased the mass of muscles in all of his legs, just to name a few. Thanks to these changes, Scooby's body is able to walk, run, and do almost all the things a normal dog would like, despite his weight, Jeremy said, which made the gang and Scooby feel really happy over it. But it has a drawback, Jeremy said, which made them all worried, because this medicine changed Scooby's physical structure so much it also made this Scooby normal size, meaning that if he starts to lose weight now, it would feel for his body like he was underweight. In a strange way, you could say that Scooby's health has never been better than now. "So you mean that Scooby has no choice but to live like this?" Fred asked. I'm afraid so. Jeremy said. That is, if Scooby himself doesn't have any problems having this new body. Do you, Scooby? Scooby thought for a moment about it, and then answered, nope, I'm starting to like it. While giving his midsection a pat. Then I guess that we got what we came for, gang. Fred said as they exit the building and walked towards the mystery machine. We got Scooby examined and the vet's certificate that his health was good. Now we can continue our journey towards new mysteries. As the rest of the gang got in the van without problems, Scooby had some issues fitting in the backseat, but soon got in as they closed the doors and started to drive off. Shaggy said to Scooby, like, no offense now, Scooby, but I don't think we can have any more eating contests anymore. I just wouldn't stand a chance. It's okay, Raggy, I understand. Scooby answered as the mystery machine was driving off towards the horizon. Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
That's all, Zipsters! Like and subscribe.